Chipo Dendere is a professor of political science at Amherst College in Massachusetts. She specializes in African politics and joins me via Skype. So Mugabe ignored his party's deadline to resign, now is facing impeachment. You gotta wonder what it's going to take for the reality of the situation to really sink in here for Mr. Mugabe.
Hi. Well, President Robert Mugabe has been known for being very stubborn. I think it was a little bit haste on the part of the ruling party faction that wanted him out to expect that it should have happened on Wednesday. People that are privy to the details told me that they expected that the army would show up on television on Tuesday evening, or rather Wednesday morning in Zimbabwe, and that by late afternoon on Wednesday, the process should have been done. But as the previous speaker has already said, the situation in Zimbabwe is particularly complex because of the various legal issues that are involved. So Zimbabwe is what we call a competitive authoritarian regime, which means an authoritarian regime that also has particularly strong institutions that would mirror democratic institutions. Hence, the impeachment process is not going to be easy. The military generals broke some laws, which President Mugabe alluded to in his very confusing and disappointing speech for most Zimbabweans. But he did. Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this. If you are 93-year-old Robert Mugabe, why not leave with your head up high and leave peacefully instead of really dragging Zimbabwe through this mess?
That would be ideal, but I think it has to do with the way that the negotiations were happening. So a wild card that everybody has not been talking about, I did post about this last week, is that the current and only viable person to succeed Robert Mugabe is Vice President Mpoko. And as you heard, the faction that's associated with former Vice President Mnangagwa was interested in getting Mnangagwa into office, which is quite tricky if he's not part of the executive. And so I think Robert Mugabe was refusing to yield to some of those negotiations. But as we've just heard from the military, the two men will meet, and that will decide not only the fate of President Robert Mugabe, but also the fate of the man who is set to succeed him, Vice President Pekezela Mpoko.
What do you know about his wife? Didn't this internal struggle really start with Mugabe wanting Grace to succeed him?
Well, I've written about Grace Mugabe, and I would say that Grace was a catalyst, yes. And in the future, we'll get to talk about what it means for women, the way that Grace Mugabe is being talked about. And certainly, she caused some rift within the party. She caused some serious problems. But I think there was a sense, especially from the war veterans, that they were not wanting Grace to ascend to power, and most Zimbabweans would agree. So there is a lot about the role that Grace Mugabe played and the power that she had amassed herself, and how she was able to yield that to get rid of some people in the party.
Chipo, very quickly, does anyone know where she is?
My understanding is that she is in Zimbabwe at the Blue Roof.
Okay, and finally, is Robert Mugabe still under house arrest, and is the military still calling the shots here?
The military just gave a statement where they continue to refer to him as the commander-in-chief, and it sounds like that there is still some military presence. At least we saw yesterday when he gave the State of the Nation address that there was a lot of military around him. Is he still under house arrest? That's a good question, because we've not seen him giving his speeches by himself or moving around the country without military personnel around him.
All right, we'll leave it there. Chipo Dendere, much appreciated.